Why do you need to understand the law to do family history? Well, I'm not an attorney, so I can't tell you anything, but I have Judy Russell, aka the Legal Genealogist, here with me, and she is, and she can. So today we're going to talk a little bit about why it's important to understand law in order to be a good family historian, in order to really research well. So we're going to tell you a little bit about why you need to know, what are some of the things that you need to know in order to find the records that you want to find, as well as maybe some of the places where you can go to find those records, because it can be a little bit daunting for some people. And at the end of the video, I'm going to ask Judy about how she got into genealogy. So Judy, thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thank you for having me. This is wonderful.
Happy. Yeah. So tell me, I know one of your mottos is,
to understand the records, we have to understand the law.
I've quoted you in my videos.
And it's not just the law in general, it's the law at the time and in the place where that record was created.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is something that most of us, when we're baby genealogists, we kind of make assumptions that the law, say in Virginia, is going to be the same as it was in Massachusetts, because, hey, it's all the United States, right?
Right.
But there are some real differences depending on time and place.
What are some of the most basic things? Because I've been to many, many of your classes, and I can honestly attribute a lot of the understanding that I now have about the importance of the law to you. And so, but for people that are just starting out, it really is kind of overwhelming. What are some of the basic things that are really evident as you're researching your family history and you're encountering those laws that do make a difference in your research?
I think the thing that we really need to kind of back up and go all the way to basic principles. Why do the records exist in the first place?
Good point.
In many cases, we wouldn't have the records if it weren't for the law. And then the question is, what gets recorded in those records? What's the data that gets written down? Mm-hmm. And in many cases, it's the law that dictates what has to be there. Yeah. Then we think about, okay, if I'm going to pull this piece of information out of this record, can I trust it? Is it really good evidence? Is it going to document this fact? It's the legal purpose of the record that will tell us. I mean, think about, for example, a death certificate. The purpose legally of a death certificate is to document a death. So the name of the deceased, the place where the death occurred, the cause of death, I'm taking that to the bank. Mm-hmm. But it also asks who the parents are.
Right.
Nobody ever gets prosecuted for naming the wrong parents in a death certificate. It's not the legal purpose.
Right.
So all of that shows essentially why the law is so intimately involved in genealogical research. Yeah. I was talking this morning with another genealogist about, for example, a law here in Virginia, which said that if there wasn't enough money in the estate to support the children after the death of the father, the children could be bound out, placed with other families to raise, if the child was not of an age to choose a guardian. Oh. How do you know?
Right.
You have to know the legal foundation.
Right.
And there are all kinds of things that pop up in records, in deeds, in wills. Why is it being done this way?
Yeah.
And the answer is almost always because of the law.
Yeah. I was just with another genealogist at the Library of Virginia last night, and he encountered it was a deed, and one of the people that signed the deed wasn't the person he was interested in, but the age, he was like, could he have signed this at 9 years old? And I said, I don't know the law in this time period. I know minors could own property, but I don't know that they could be witnesses. And I said, you should ask Judy Russell.
And the answer in that case would be no. He would have been too young at 9.
Yeah.
But he would have been old enough at 14.
Oh, really? Okay.
A boy was considered of the age of discretion at 14 under the common law.
Yeah.
A 9-year-old is a little young. But that's going to help us distinguish between this John Jones and that John Jones.
Right.
If this John Jones is 9, he's not the witness.
Right.
But if that John Jones is 15, he could be.
Yeah.
That's why the law comes into play so many times.
It really has solved so many mysteries in my research. It really has. I think some of the biggest things that when I first was learning more about the law in genealogy and family history was dower rights, because that affects so many things, and often because they're just assumed in all of those records, unless you understand why something's happening, it's confusing. And then the other really big one for me is guardianship records.
Absolutely.
Until I learned about the fact that a woman didn't count, really, as the guardian if her husband passed, that a man would have been appointed as guardian, all of a sudden I went, I have not been looking for guardianship records when I should have, because the mother was still alive, and I made that today assumption that wasn't the case.
There's so many of them. People assume that because the wife is not named in the will, that she's dead, and dower, which was the right of a widow to 1/3 of a life estate in 1/3 of her husband's lands. So many husbands never bothered mentioning their wives because dower was automatic in the law.
Yeah.
And so they didn't bother.
Yeah.
Here in Virginia, for example, not just the widows being not mentioned, but Virginia followed a system from England called primogeniture, where the oldest son automatically got any land that the father didn't explicitly leave to somebody else.
So there won't be a deed record. I've encountered this a lot. People are like, but there's no indication that this guy inherited this land. And I'm like,
It was
there's
automatic.
not going to be.
It was absolutely
But that proves
automatic.
relation if he then disposes of the land later, and a
Or-
lot of people don't know that.
Or pays taxes on it in the
Right.
next year.
Well, that's a good point.
There are lots and lots of these little nuances.
Yeah.
And one of the places we all need to go to look at these records is a place that scares a lot of beginning genealogists, and that's
is
the
that?
idea of going physically to a courthouse.
Oh, yeah.
And the only thing I can tell you about that is if you will do it once, just get over your fear, go to a courthouse. Pick a little one. Don't go to the New York City courthouse, but a little county where your people were. They've got the deed records, they've got the marriage records, they've got they've got the tax records that your people paid taxes on one horse even when they didn't own land. There's just so much that is in those records, and you can physically hold in your hand that 1800 deed of your
cool.
ancestor.
I agree.
It's a marvelous opportunity to really connect with family history.
Yeah.
So courthouses, legal records, the laws, they all come together.
I have found out that sometimes they don't know. Like, I've asked them questions, and a lot of the people in the courthouse, you'd think they were in the courthouse, but when we're talking about 1800s or earlier, they frequently they don't know themselves.
No,
So,
but there's a question that we all need to ask that we don't ask often enough. And that's, can you tell me who here in the courthouse is the expert in these old records?
okay.
And if they don't have one there, then you're looking for the County Historical Society, the County Genealogical Society, and you want to connect with them anyway.
Right.
Because they're going to be the ones who are going to say, don't go to the courthouse on Friday. Myrtle's there on Friday. She won't let you see anything. You want to go on Thursday afternoon. That's when Wendy's there, and she'll let you look at the good stuff. So that local connection is so important. And these are the people who have dealt with these issues year in and year out. They're as likely to know why that woman is not the guardian as anything.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What are some, if somebody is maybe intimidated still to go to a courthouse or they're not quite there yet, where are some places people can go to learn a little bit more, maybe some books or some online websites where I know that every state is different, every time period is different, and in my experience, sometimes it's been really difficult to figure out, to find a location where I can get the information I even emailed you once and said, you should write a book about this. And your response to me was,
I don't have time.
Exactly. But what's a good spot?
The first place to start for kind of just general background on a jurisdiction where you haven't researched before is the Family Search Wiki.
Oh, great. Okay.
It's free, it's comprehensive, it will tell you about records loss in that county or that state. It'll give you a background in when vital records began and when you might be able to access them, what they have online, and of course the big thing about Family Search, the entire website is free. It's simply a matter of registering, and then you've got open access to virtually everything that's there. That's a really good resource. Another one that's fabulous for particularly beginning genealogists, but persists in being valuable right up until I think you're becoming an ancestor yourself, is Cindy's List.
Yeah, that's true.
If you go to the state entry, so they have categories on Cindy's List, and there's a category for every state. There's a link under every state for laws and statutes. Okay. And she has gone through and tried to identify every resource for the historic laws of each jurisdiction.
Oh, what a wealth of information.
It's a terrific place to go.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
So both of those, I think, are great places to start. Beyond that, there are courses, there are webinars, there are week-long institute courses that'll get people going.
Right.
But you got to do it, and you can't be afraid to dig into a record. And you should never be afraid as a genealogist to ask another genealogist for help. Contact that local genealogical society and say, have you ever seen this before?
Or even Facebook groups and other places like that. I've seen that. I've used it before. Those work really wonderfully as well. People are so kind to respond to, oh yeah, I've seen this before. So when you encounter something in a record and you don't know what it means, you see something in a will or in a deed or something in your family history and you don't get it, it may pertain to the laws. So ask around and find out what that is. That's a great suggestion.
Absolutely. And the Genealogy Squad, which is on Facebook, is a great place to ask those kinds of questions. I know that frequently the moderators there will tag me and say, here's a legal question, would you come in and take a look at this?
So nice.
So it's a sharing community.
Yeah.
It is. People want, it's the rising tide lifts all boats. And we're all going to come up together.
Yeah.
I may know the law, but you may know a record set that I've never heard of.
Right.
It's a sharing thing. The ability to have a kind of a base level understanding of the law is such a foundation for all of the genealogical research that you'll do after that. So taking the time to just kind of noodle around, get a sense for what the laws were in your jurisdiction. And the other thing to remember when you're reading through those early laws, they're giving you the history of your people.
That's
what
true.
was important enough to them to put it into the laws at that time period?
Yeah,
what were the laws of slavery at that time period? Why could you not serve in public office if you had been involved in a duel? What was taxed? I mean, you can see the so-called sin taxes that we talk about today. We've had them forever.
Yeah.
They would tax gaming halls and taverns much more than they would tax anybody else.
And those can be great records. I had an ancestor that had a tavern, and
They're
it was awesome.
wonderful records. And in some jurisdictions, you couldn't get a tavern license without a petition from your neighbors, which gave your enemies the opportunity to have a counter petition. So you not only get your friends list, you get the people you need to watch out for. They're terrific records.
Yeah.
And it's the history of your people that's coming through in these legal records.
Well, on another note, I want to shift a little bit because most people that have been involved in genealogy for any length of time have heard the name Judy Russell. But I don't think very many people know a lot about you. Tell me how you got interested in genealogy.
It's pretty much the common situation.
Yeah.
My mother's family is Scots-Irish. If you know the Scots-Irish, you know they are storytellers. And they never let the truth interfere with a good story. So for years and years, I would hear these family stories. And you finally get to the point of going, is any of this even marginally true? And I went to the funeral of the first member of my generation to pass. It was my oldest cousin's husband. And after the funeral, we all went over to my aunt's home. And in my mind, I'm seeing all of these young, dark-haired, vibrant people who are my aunts and uncles. And I'm looking around at all of these old, frail, white-haired people and realizing we're losing all of the family stories. My grandparents are gone. My own parents are gone. Here are the few left of my mother's generation. It's now or never. And that's really when I decided I need to know, are these stories true?
So did you start getting into genealogy before you retired from the law? Or,
Oh, yeah.
Or were you, so you were involved in that then? When was it that you really started diving into genealogy so people know it's never too late?
It was pretty much, I mean, I was pushing 50 before I really got into it. And then it just snowballed. You know, once you get a taste and you're on the hunt, you know, genealogy, family history as a whole, is like a jigsaw puzzle, except you don't have a box top to tell you what the picture's going to look like. And you have to go find all the pieces.
Yeah.
And that's when you're going to assemble it and see what the family history looks like.
Yeah.
So once you start getting some of those pieces and you start putting it together, you're either hooked for life or you're running away screaming.
That's true. It's a one or the other. I say it's detective work at its best. To
Absolutely.
me, I feel like I'm a detective and it's so much fun.
And more than that, it gives you a sense of connection to your own background.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I grew up in New Jersey, and we would take our school trips to Washington's Crossing, crossing the Delaware, and never meant a thing to me. It was a day out of school. And then I found out my fourth great-grandfather had been in that crossing. And we had lost a fourth great-grand-uncle at the Battle of Trenton.
Wow.
It gives you a personal connection to history and gives you a perspective on your own life. When you look back and you realize what your ancestors had to survive for you to be here today, you don't take it so personal when the internet goes out or the lights go out for a while. These are first world problems compared to losing your first 3 kids to an epidemic. It's a perspective on life that you get from family history.
Yeah, well, I am so glad that you caught the bug and that you've been sharing your vast knowledge with all of us, because it really makes all the difference in the world. It really does. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and remember that all I'm doing is passing on the gifts that were given to me by so many genealogists when I was starting out. And that's the joy of this community, is that everybody does believe that we all work together.
Well, and I will say, if you ever are at a conference and you have the opportunity or through your genealogical society to hear one of Judy's talks, I'm a little bit picky about who I like to go watch, but I will always catch one of hers because they're so informative and entertaining. She has you riveted. It's a wonderful presentation, so don't miss it. Thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate it. Thanks for watching. If you'd please subscribe, that would be great. And I'm so glad you're watching today. Check out one of these videos and have a great day.